Greetings, family. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Advocate Puleng. In my YouTube channel, we teach South African law and we also share the Word of God. So today, I want to welcome you and I want to thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. I want to welcome all our new members. Thank you for joining us. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider to subscribe. Today, I will talk briefly on the law of insolvency in South Africa. Now, the first question that we would ask is, what is insolvency? Or when do you say a person is insolvent? A person is insolvent when they are unable to pay their debts. They are not able to pay their bills when the bills are due. They have more liabilities, or their liabilities exceeds their assets. In other words, you have a very big house, you have a very big car, you have expensive leather jackets, those label clothes, but you are not able to pay your dues. And this can happen, as an example, in the beginning, it could have been that you are able to pay, but now maybe you fall ill, you're no longer able to keep a job, or you are retrenched, or your business it's failing. For one reason or another, you are no longer able to pay for your debts, to pay for your bills when they are due. We live in very challenging times. The economies of the world have been challenged as a result of the pandemic that we have gone through as nations of the world. However, I must hasten to mention that there are people who actually became multimillionaires, pandemic multimillionaires, because they were in businesses that cater for the situation, especially those who are in the medical space. They were able to make lots and lots of money out of the pandemic, out of the situation that was created by the pandemic. Funeral parlors, sad to say, they thrive during this time. But it does not mean that insolvency or a person can be declared insolvent only because of that situation. Even in our day-to-day life, where people are not able to manage their finances well, not being able to draw a budget, or drawing it but not even sticking to it, that can also cause financial problems. Sometimes competing with the Jones, sometimes owing people money. We've heard of instances where people rob Peter to pay Paul. You owe Paul, and then in order to pay him, you have to go borrow from Peter to pay Paul. So it's those situations where sometimes it's not out of people's own volition or negligence, but sometimes it can be just life happening, challenges of life. Now, the question is, when you find yourself in that situation, what do you do? I know that there are instances where people try to run away from this obligation. Some are just negligent, some they are really not negligent. And some people, instead of, just picking up a phone and trying to resolve issue, they'll rather ignore the creditors. When they begin to pressurize you, some people just ignore them. Whereas, in some instances, debt can be a reality, and sometimes you can learn from the situation. Not that you have to go through it to learn, but sometimes, if there was negligence, you can learn out of the situation. So now the question is, what is it that you can do in South Africa when you're faced with that situation? There's something that is called debt review, whereby you restructure your finances and the court there can issue an order for you to come out of that situation. But the debt review story is one of the many options that you can take, or one of the routes that you can take to try and salvage the situation. But today, the focus is insolvency. When you try to be insolvent, or when you make an application and try to get an order to that effect, being applying for insolvency, it has got pros and it has got cons. One of the benefits is that now there are no more debts. It eliminates debts. It eliminates unsecured debts. Those debts, they go away. And one of the benefits again is that there will be no more legal action. Because you remember in South Africa, if you owe them, if they follow you up, you don't want to pay, ultimately they will institute an action whereby the sheriff will come to your house, they take your property, they auction it. So once you apply for insolvency, that legal action will automatically stop. And also the other benefit is the low once-off costs that you will pay. If you are in a lease situation, maybe you are leasing a property or you are leasing a house, you'll be able to cancel the lease even prior to the duration or the extension of the lease. And obviously, you'll be no longer pressurized by creditors. Now we've spoken about the benefits. What are the cons? What are the negatives that go hand in hand with this application? The first one is that it will obviously damage or affect your credit record, and thus it will affect any credit decisions that will have to be taken around you. Except for the fact that once you have applied as a pro, which I did not mention, it gives you a fresh start. It definitely gives you a fresh start. But now at that time, already your credit record or your credit score or your credit worthiness is affected. And another disadvantage is that even some of your assets may be sold and you would obviously lose them. And that's one of the disadvantages. But obviously, special arrangements will have to be made in that regard. And that situation on its own, it diminishes your legal capacity in that you have to apply to be declared insolvent, and that somehow you will not have capacity to make certain decisions, including obviously the obvious one here being your credit decision. It will be diminished to a certain extent. Now the question is, once you are declared insolvent, who gets paid first? Because obviously at that stage, there is limited amount. What is called secured creditors will be paid first. Secured creditors here means the ones with secured interest. Now the question is, how long does insolvency last? Or when can you be discharged? Usually, it takes a period of 12 months to be discharged. There are instances where it can be less than 12 months from the time when the order was granted. However, there are instances where it can be more than 12 months. This is when it is called delay discharged. The discharge can be delayed. The same court that issue an order must discharge you, and there must be proof to that effect. There must be a certificate that will be issued to confirm that indeed you are no longer declared an insolvent and that you have been discharged. And if, as I have just indicated, it will differ from time to time. It's mostly 12 months. It may be less in some instances. It may be lower. It may be longer in certain instances. But the standard, the average is 12 months. So obviously it will depend from case to case for one to be discharged. Um, in South Africa, we have seen with recent events, without referring specifically to the facts of that case, that when you are declared insolvent, you are not allowed to hold a public office. But even if you're not declared insolvent, there are certain positions that you cannot occupy because of your credit record, just a credit record, not even because you are declared insolvent, just because your name has been submitted to credit bureaus, because this is something that they check from time to time. Even when you make application for a government job, you may be surprised that you are applying and then you're not getting a job, only to find that is because of your credit record. So these are some of the things that we should follow up and not take for granted, and not try to run away from the situation. Try by all means to salvage the situation. You can apply for a debt review, for that restructuring. If the situation is worse, you can apply to be declared insolvent to try and salvage that situation. And you can be restored and you can be discharged. And when you are discharged, after you've gone through all the conditions that you have to meet for you to be discharged, then you will be discharged. Like somebody will ask, will I ever be able to buy a car? Will I ever be able to buy a house? Yes. Once you are discharged, once you're officially discharged, I must mention, you can buy a house. But you must remember the fact that you are given an opportunity to start afresh. It means that you start at the bottom of the ladder with a credit record story, and then you build it up. And it is possible. If you just commit to it, you can build up that credit record. But don't just leave it hanging like that. Don't just leave it hanging like that. Attend to it. Pick up phones. Talk to creditors. Find out, make necessary arrangement. And in my humble opinion, make insolvency your last resort. Try other things before you resort to insolvency. And even if you have to be declared insolvent, yes, you can go through that process, but at a later stage, you can be restored and you can have another chance to start your life. I thank you. Thank you for listening to my video. And please share, comment, ask me questions, but don't ask me for legal opinion. Just ask me questions around what I have discussed. Because what I'm doing now is legal education, is not legal advice. If you have a case around this issue, you may have to approach an attorney of your choice. I wish you all the best. Thank you.